to it. In the book of Acts, we read that Paul goes to a city named Philippi, and he meets a woman who is a cloth dyer. She's a wealthy woman because she specializes in the purple dye that is found by using the snails in the northern part of the Mediterranean Sea. And so this woman now is able to sponsor and support the ministry work that Paul is going to do. And so he's making tents to sort of compensate for his ministry, but he's spending most of his time trying to let people know about Jesus and trying to tell them about Jesus. And so then he establishes this little church community, he establishes this group, and somewhere along the way, the people who are the establishment, whether it's the Jewish establishment or the Roman establishment, they all sort of coalesce their anger against Paul, and they decide, we're going to throw Paul in jail. So they throw Paul in jail, and before they throw him in jail, they flog him. Now, flogging, remember, that's the thing that Jesus went through before he was crucified. It's the same Greek word. We don't have any reason to believe that what Paul went through was any different than what Jesus went through. And if you've ever seen the Passion of the Christ movie, you know what the flogging, the whipping thing is all about. Maybe Paul didn't have as thorough of a 39 lashings kind of thing, or maybe Paul had a less amount. I don't really know. All I know is he had to go through it. And then after he goes through it, he's there in jail. And while he's in jail with his buddy Silas, they're singing songs, thanking God for what they're going through, praising God for what they're going through. And during the middle of the night, an earthquake comes, completely ransacks the jail. All the chains fall off all of these guys, not just Paul and Silas, but all the other criminals too. The gates of the jail are opened up, and somehow, we're not told how, but somehow Paul convinces all the other prisoners to stay. Maybe he was a really good singer. And they were just kind of enjoying the thing that was going on. I don't know, but he convinces them all to stay. So the jailer comes in, and the jailer says, oh my goodness, the jail doors are open. I'm going to kill myself. And just before he runs the sword through his heart, Paul says, wait a minute. We're all here. And the jailer, astonished, says, okay, what do I need to do to be saved? What do I need to do to become like you? So Paul then leaves the jail. The jailer, under the jailer's custody, the jailer takes Paul and Silas over to his house, and they share the message of Jesus with the jailer and his household, and we're told the entire household becomes believers because of what happens there. And then the next morning, everybody finds out that Paul's a Roman citizen who was tried who went to jail without a trial, and so he's released, he's free, he's gone. Well, now Paul is in prison, and he's writing a letter to the church at Philippi, and one of the guys who's there at this church is a man who saw Paul with the chains on. And so Paul is writing them, and he's like, I just want to let you know that now I'm in Rome, and I'm wearing chains. And so Paul is doing something that's amazing. It happened in Philippi, and he's doing it again here. We can know there are two realities that Paul is expressing to the people he's talking to. The first reality is that he is suffering in chains. It's not just that he's in jail wearing chains. It's the whole part of the process. It's how they treat prisoners. It's all of that stuff. And on top of it, it's the fact that there are these people running around the city of Rome who are talking about Jesus to try to incite greater opposition in the crowds against this Jesus character, because if the people out there dislike Jesus, they will also dislike Paul. And so there are some guys out there who are talking about Jesus. They're proclaiming the message of Jesus, but they're doing it in such a way that it's working against Paul, and it's making life worse for him. So he's in jail, he's in chains, he's suffering. But that's only half the story. The other half of the story is that he's experiencing great joy. I don't understand this. But I mean, the same guy who is in Philippi with scars on his back deeper than anything I've ever experienced in my whole life can sing songs. That's the same dude who's now in Rome writing a letter to the Philippians saying, I greatly rejoice in all of this. Did you notice that phrase? He says, whether from false motives or from true, I greatly rejoice that the message of Jesus is being proclaimed. What is it in a person like Paul that enables him to have this kind of ability? What is it that enables a person like Paul to suffer and to rejoice? You know, my suffering stories generally involve exercise. I've told you this before, I'm not a runner, But when I was in high school, I played volleyball, and I played basketball, and I played baseball, and I ran cross country once. That was very, very dumb. But I don't ever like the conditioning. I like the playing. I like the competition. I like the winning. But I don't like the conditioning. It's just one of these problems that you have to condition your body in order to perform at your best. And so you have to condition yourself. You have to do the exercises in order to get to the place where you can perform competitively at your sport. And so I grew to understand that suffering today can lead to success later, right? I understand that. I understand that suffering now can lead to joy later, that I can struggle now and have joy later. But that's not what Paul's talking about. He's not talking about the principle of joy following suffering. He's talking about joy being in the middle of suffering. He's now in chains, and he's now rejoicing. Something is going on in Paul's life that's hinted at a couple times in chapter 1, but we don't really get until we read the whole rest of it. But I'll show you the hints. He said that everybody in Caesar's household was changed. That Caesar's household learns this message of Jesus, and they're changed. He's writing to the Philippians, and he says, I have great joy whenever I remember you in my prayers, because I remember how you were partners with me in the gospel. Every time you see the word gospel in the New Testament, you should just change that word in your mind to the word message. The message, the good news, the good message of Jesus. Paul says he's happy about the Philippians because they were partners with him in this message. And if you read the whole rest of chapter 1, you get these little snippets back and forth that keep coming up, that what Paul is really excited about is every single time someone hears the message of Jesus and their life is changed. So that even those guys who are out going around the town proclaiming Jesus in a negative way to get Paul in more trouble, even those people Paul can rejoice about because the message is getting out there. I phrase the secret this way. This is the secret of joy that Paul wants you to know. It's this: joy comes when the message of Jesus changes lives. Joy comes when the message of Jesus changes lives. After all, it changed Paul's life. Before Paul met Jesus, he was a high-flying, legal authority on the Jewish faith. In fact, he was so high up that he was given a license to kill. If he ran into anyone who was a heretic in the Jewish tradition, Paul could kill him. He was going throughout the ancient world trying to reduce the early church to ashes by capturing people, taking them back to Jerusalem, giving them a trial, and hopefully to stone them dead. And on one of those trips, Jesus came and met him on the road, and it changed Paul's life. This message